Robert Kraychik reporting for Rebel News. The Chris Carbert and Anthony Olienick trial is nearing its end. The judge, Justice David Lebrenz, will offer his charge, the instructions, to the jurors this coming Wednesday, after which they'll begin deliberating their verdicts and the charges against the two defendants. Chris Carbert and Anthony Olienick are both accused of conspiring to murder police officers at the 2022 Coutts protest and blockade. The charge of conspiracy to murder carries with it a maximum penalty, if convicted, of life imprisonment. They're also charged with unlawful possession of a firearm for a dangerous purpose and also mischief over $5,000. Anthony Olienick is additionally charged with unlawful possession of an explosive device for a dangerous purpose. The two men have pled not guilty to all the charges against them. Much like its sister protest, the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, the Coutts demonstration and blockade of 2022 was a peaceful and civilly disobedient demonstration in broad opposition to this governmental apparatus of surveillance and control and censorship, edicts, orders, mandates, all marketed to us as public health measures to reduce COVID-19 transmission. Rebel News had journalists on location, essentially embedded among the protesters at the 2022 Coutts protest and blockade. We've been covering unfolding events deeply since then. Fast forward to now, 2024, July, Lethbridge, Alberta, and we're still covering trials that came out of prosecutions that originated from that protest. I'd like to emphasize the uniqueness of this conspiracy to murder charge against the two defendants. The allegation from the Crown is that the two defendants conspired to murder police officers based on a contingency. In other words, it's a conditional conspiracy. That condition being, according to the allegation from the Crown, that Carbert and Olienick were plotting to murder police officers at Coutts in the event that police officers used violent force to enforce the law and end the blockade. Those are exact quotes from the Crown. So if the Crown were to use violent force to put down that protest, according to the prosecution, both Carbert and Olienick were preparing themselves, were plotting to murder police officers in response. There are simpler hypothetical scenarios you can contemplate to simplify this type of argument. Imagine, for example, two or more alleged co-conspirators are accused of plotting to rob some store in the event that an owner falls asleep or the shopkeeper doesn't show up on a given day. That's a conditional conspiracy. And that's the category of conspiracy that's being alleged in this trial. Yesterday's proceedings were done entirely in the absence of the jury, which means they're completely subject to a publication ban. So I cannot report on them until the jury is sequestered to begin deliberating its verdict. I want to remind you folks that there have been many interesting things that have occurred during proceedings subject to a publication ban, both during the trial and in pretrial proceedings. So there's going to be a lot of fascinating things that can be disclosed in a public reporting style once the jury begins rendering its verdicts. A few things are still outstanding before the jury receives its instructions from the judge. The first is the actual specific composition of this charge, the instructions that the judge will provide the jurors. The judge will receive input from both defense attorneys and the prosecution in terms of what specific language they'd like to see in those instructions. There'll be some back and forth, some dispute. This will happen in the absence of the jury. And of course, the judge has final discretion as to how he will specifically compose those instructions. Closing arguments are still outstanding from all the disputing parties. The two defense attorneys, Catherine Bayak, who is representing Chris Carbert, and Marilyn Burns, representing Anthony Olienick, will offer their closing arguments to the jurors, likely on Wednesday. They'll be followed by the Crown, which will offer its closing arguments as well. After which, the judge will then provide his charge to the jury, which is scheduled for this Wednesday. And of course, this journalistic enterprise cannot be done without costs. And unlike our so-called mainstream media competitors, we're not getting handouts from the federal government to toe that official line. So folks, please contribute and donate so we can keep this journalistic enterprise going. Visit truckertrial.com, help us out, and stay up to date with our ongoing coverage.